The unseen threat at Buckingham Palace. On a crisp morning at Buckingham Palace, where the Union Jack fluttered gently against a blue sky, thousands of tourists, including American visitors, milled about, snapping photos of the gilded gates and stoic guards in their iconic bearskin hats. Among them stood Sergeant Arthur Bailey, a veteran royal guard whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Though the scene was postcard perfect, Bailey sensed trouble brewing. His years of training had honed an instinct for danger, and today that instinct screamed at him. Moving through the crowd with unnatural purpose was a man in a tailored overcoat, mid-40s, roughly 6 feet tall, whose demeanor stood out starkly. While families laughed and children pointed at the palace's grandeur, this man's gaze locked onto the guards, studying their routines like a predator sizing up prey. His expensive attire and calm stride might have fooled others, but to Bailey they were red flags. This wasn't a tourist. This was a threat. The tension escalated silently. The man edged closer, his hand brushing against his coat lining, a telltale sign of concealed weaponry. Then in a flash, he drew a .45 caliber pistol, a familiar firearm to many Americans, and pressed it to Bailey's forehead. The crowd froze. Time seemed to stop. Yet Bailey, his face as unreadable as the palace's stone facade, didn't flinch. The attacker sneered, spitting venom about the monarchy being a relic of the past. But Bailey's silence was his shield. His medals, earned through years of service, glistened in the sunlight, a silent testament to his resolve. What happened next unfolded with military precision. As the attacker's finger tensed on the trigger, Bailey's training kicked in. In a move reminiscent of U.S. Special Forces tactics, he twisted the gunman's wrist, disarmed him, and forced him to the pavement, all in under 3 seconds. The customized pistol, later revealed to have tactical modifications, clattered onto the cobblestones, harmless. Tourists gasped, some cheered. But Bailey, ever the professional, simply returned to his post, his posture rigid, his focus unbroken. This incident wasn't just about one guard's bravery. It was a masterclass in discipline, a reminder that threats lurk where we least expect them. For older Americans who've witnessed crises, from Cold War tensions to 9/11, Bailey's calm under fire echoes values they hold dear: preparedness, humility, and the courage to stand firm when chaos strikes. As the attacker was led away in cuffs, the palace's tranquility returned. But those who'd seen the event left with a renewed respect for the quiet guardians who keep history safe. The confrontation, a test of courage at Buckingham Palace. The air was thick with tension as the well-dressed stranger stepped forward, his polished Oxford shoes clicking against the centuries-old cobblestones of Buckingham Palace. Sergeant Arthur Bailey, a veteran guard with over 15 years of service, immediately recognized this was no ordinary tourist. The man's expensive Burberry trench coat and Rolex watch might have fooled the casual observer, but Bailey's trained eye saw through the disguise. His military training kicked in. The man's posture was too rigid, his scanning of security details too methodical, his hands too ready near his waistline, where weapons are often concealed. As the distance between them closed to just 6 feet, time seemed to slow. The attacker's right hand suddenly disappeared beneath his coat. In that split second, Bailey's years of training with the Coldstream Guards, the British Army's most elite infantry regiment, took over. He'd practiced this scenario hundreds of times. The quick draw, the muzzle flash, the deafening report of gunfire in confined spaces. But this was no training exercise. The gleaming .45 caliber 1911 pistol, an American-made firearm Bailey recognized immediately from joint NATO training exercises, emerged with terrifying speed. The cold steel barrel came to rest directly against Bailey's forehead, its distinctive front sight post digging into his skin. A hush fell over the crowd as tourists froze mid-photo, their smartphones capturing every terrifying moment. "You're just a prop in a dying circus," the assailant spat, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey and mint. His words carried the distinct accent of an educated Londoner, though something about his cadence suggested Eastern European roots. Bailey remained statue still, his eyes locked forward in perfect military bearing, but his mind raced through tactical options. The weight of his ceremonial bearskin hat suddenly felt oppressive as sweat trickled down his temples. What happened next would later be described by Scotland Yard investigators as a textbook example of close-quarters combat. As the attacker's finger tensed on the trigger, Bailey executed a flawless disarmament sequence. His left hand chopped upward to redirect the weapon while his right sees the pistol slide. A sharp twist and pull, techniques honed through countless hours with British Special Forces, and the customized handgun, later found to have a filed-off serial number, was in Bailey's control. The would-be assassin's face twisted in shock as Bailey delivered a crushing knee strike to his solar plexus, followed by an elbow to the temple that sent him crumpling to the ground. Nearby tourists screamed as the man collapsed, his designer sunglasses shattering against the pavement. Through it all, Bailey's expression never changed, the epitome of British stoicism even as adrenaline coursed through his veins. This wasn't just physical combat, it was a psychological victory. The attacker, later identified as a former private military contractor with ties to extremist groups, had clearly expected fear or hesitation. Instead, he encountered the unshakable discipline of one of Britain's finest. As armed response teams swarmed the scene, Bailey simply adjusted his bearskin, resumed his position, and continued his vigil, a living testament to the courage that guards not just palaces, but the very ideals of civilized society. For American observers, particularly veterans familiar with high-stakes security details, the incident carried profound resonance. It demonstrated that true protection isn't about brute force, but about split-second judgment, unwavering composure, and the moral courage to stand firm when everything is on the line. The .45 caliber pistol now sits in an evidence locker, but the lesson it provided about duty and sacrifice will endure far longer. The enduring symbolism of duty, a Royal Guards trial by fire. The confrontation between Sergeant Arthur Bailey and his armed assailant at Buckingham Palace transcended a mere security incident. It became a powerful allegory for the timeless struggle between order and chaos, tradition and anarchy. As the echoes of the .45 caliber's discharge faded across the palace courtyard, what remained was not just a disarmed attacker, but a vivid demonstration of values that resonate deeply across cultures and generations, particularly with America's senior citizens who have lived through their nation's own tests of resolve. The attacker, later identified as Mikhail Petrov, a disgraced former intelligence officer turned mercenary, represented more than just a physical threat. His mocking diatribe against the monarchy as empty symbols struck at the heart of why societies preserve traditions. When he sneered at Bailey's ceremonial uniform and medals, he failed to understand that these were not mere decorations, but visible manifestations of service and sacrifice, concepts as familiar to American veterans as their own campaign ribbons and unit patches. The Coldstream Guard's scarlet tunic and bearskin hat, often dismissed by outsiders as theatrical costumes, in reality represent centuries of institutional knowledge passed down through generations of soldiers, much like the traditions of the U.S. Marine Corps or Old Guard at Arlington Cemetery. Bailey's response to the crisis embodied principles that would be immediately recognizable to any graduate of West Point or Annapolis. His initial restraint, absorbing Petrov's verbal abuse without reaction, wasn't weakness, but the disciplined application of the escalation of force protocol used by military police worldwide. When action became necessary, his movements were economical and precise, a 2.3-second disarmament sequence, later measured by forensic experts, that prioritized weapon control over punitive strikes. Even after neutralizing the threat, his immediate return to post mirrored the mission-first mentality drilled into all professional warriors. The psychological dimensions of the encounter revealed even deeper parallels. Petrov's gradual unraveling, from smug superiority to sputtering rage when faced with Bailey's imperturbable bearing, mirrored the collapse of countless bullies and tyrants throughout history when confronted with principled resistance. For older Americans who remember the Cold War, the image of one resolute guard standing against a trained operative carried unmistakable echoes of Checkpoint Charlie or the Berlin Wall's fall. The palace courtyard became in that moment a microcosm of civilization's eternal vigilance against those who would destroy rather than build. What makes Bailey's actions particularly instructive for contemporary audiences is their contrast with modern culture's celebration of loud bravado over quiet competence. In an era of social media posturing and performative outrage, his silent professionalism offered a masterclass in true strength. The tourist's smartphone footage, rather than capturing panic or hesitation, showed the almost supernatural calm of a professional operating exactly as trained, a quality any Vietnam or Gulf War veteran would instantly recognize from their own service. The aftermath revealed another layer of significance. While politicians and pundits rushed to politicize the event, Bailey himself refused all interview requests, adhering to the Royal Guard's tradition of silent service. This dignified refusal to capitalize on his heroism stands in stark contrast to today's influencer culture, presenting an alternative model of masculinity that values duty over celebrity. For American seniors raised on the ideals of John Wayne and Audie Murphy, men who did what needed doing without fanfare, Bailey's conduct reaffirmed timeless truths about character. Ultimately, the Buckingham Palace incident distilled profound questions into a single dramatic moment. Why do societies preserve ancient institutions? What makes ordinary people perform extraordinary acts of courage? How do civilizations maintain continuity against constant threats? The answers were written in Bailey's steady hands, his unbroken gaze, and his immediate return to duty, a living rebuke to Petrov's nihilism and a reminder that the best guardians are often those who ask for no recognition. As the sun set that evening, casting long shadows across the palace gates, Sergeant Bailey remained at his post. The tourists had dispersed, the news crews had packed their gear, but the principles on display, duty, discipline, quiet courage, continued their silent watch. For older Americans who remember when such values were society's bedrock rather than curiosities, the lesson was clear. Civilizations endure not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of fidelity by those who take their posts seriously. The .45 caliber pistol now sits in an evidence room, but its real defeat came not from Bailey's physical techniques, but from his unshakable commitment to something greater than himself, a commitment that knows no national boundaries. Why this matters: the enduring legacy of Sergeant Bailey's heroism. The dramatic confrontation between Sergeant Arthur Bailey and his armed assailant at Buckingham Palace transcends a simple security incident. For American audiences, particularly those aged 50 and above, this event carries profound significance that speaks to universal values of duty, vigilance, and quiet heroism. In an era where sensationalism often overshadows substance, Bailey's actions remind us why certain principles remain worth defending across generations and cultures. The attacker's choice of weapon, a .45 caliber pistol, immediately resonated with American observers. This iconic firearm, standard issue for U.S. forces through multiple wars, represents more than just firepower. It symbolizes the weight of responsibility carried by those who swear to protect. When Bailey disarmed the assailant with such precision, veterans recognized techniques perfected by generations of American and Allied servicemen. The efficiency of his movements, honed through countless hours of training, mirrored the discipline instilled in U.S. Marines guarding embassies or Secret Service agents protecting presidents. What makes this incident particularly compelling for older Americans is its contrast with modern culture's treatment of heroism. In today's world of viral moments and instant celebrity, Bailey's immediate return to duty after the confrontation stands as powerful testimony to a different code of conduct. Where social media often rewards loud self-promotion, Bailey's silent professionalism harks back to an era when actions spoke louder than tweets, a time familiar to those who remember World War II veterans or Cold War leaders who shunned the spotlight while serving their nations. The psychological dimensions of the encounter reveal equally important lessons. As the attacker ranted about dying symbols, he failed to understand that the true power of institutions like the monarchy, or by extension, America's founding principles, lies not in their physical manifestations, but in their ability to inspire ordinary people to extraordinary acts of service. For seniors who lived through the civil rights movement or stood vigilant during the Cold War, this truth resonates deeply. The institutions we preserve matter less for what they are than for what they represent. and for the better angels of human nature they can summon when tested. Bailey's conduct also offers a masterclass in situational awareness that transcends national boundaries. His ability to identify a threat amid thousands of tourists mirrors the vigilance required of air marshals on September 11th or police officers patrolling American streets. In an age of distracted attention, his focused alertness, developed through years of disciplined service, models the kind of engaged citizenship that keeps society safe. For grandparents concerned about younger generations glued to smartphones, Bailey's example provides a compelling case for staying present in the physical world. The aftermath of the incident carries its own significance. While the world rushed to celebrate Bailey as a hero, his refusal to capitalize on his fame, declining interviews and returning to duty, speaks volumes about authentic leadership. This quiet humility stands in stark contrast to today's influencer culture and recalls an earlier America where heroes like Audie Murphy or Neil Armstrong let their deeds speak for themselves. For seniors who remember when modesty was considered virtuous rather than quaint, Bailey's conduct reaffirms timeless truths about character. Perhaps most importantly, this event reminds us that security is never guaranteed. It requires constant vigilance from ordinary people performing extraordinary service. The tourists who initially failed to notice the threat represent our natural tendency toward complacency, while Bailey embodies the necessity of prepared professionalism. In this sense, the Buckingham Palace confrontation serves as a metaphor for the fragile nature of civilization itself, always one generation away from disappearing unless consciously preserved by those willing to stand guard. As we reflect on this incident, its lessons extend far beyond London's palace gates. They speak to the importance of maintaining standards, honoring tradition while adapting to new threats, and recognizing that true courage often wears not a cape, but a uniform. For older Americans who have witnessed their own nation's trials, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to 9/11, Bailey's story reaffirms that the values they've long cherished remain relevant in an uncertain world. The .45 caliber pistol may have been silenced that day, but its echo continues to remind us why we still need guardians at the gate, both literal and figurative, in every generation. Life lessons from a guardian's courage. Sergeant Arthur Bailey's confrontation at Buckingham Palace teaches us profound truths about resilience and purpose. His calm under fire reminds us that true strength lies not in aggression, but in disciplined restraint, a lesson for handling life's sudden crises with composure. The way he spotted danger amid routine echoes our need to stay vigilant in comfortable times, recognizing that threats often come disguised. His immediate return to duty after disarming the attacker shows that real heroes don't seek applause. They find fulfillment in faithful service. For seniors, this story affirms timeless values, that traditions matter not as relics, but as vessels for enduring principles worth protecting. Like Bailey's medals, earned through quiet dedication, our life's worth is measured in steadfast commitments, not fleeting recognition. The attacker's mocking of symbols failed to understand that what we preserve, family, community, hard-won freedoms, gives meaning to our struggles. In an age of constant noise, Bailey's silent professionalism teaches that the deepest impact often comes from simply showing up day after day with integrity intact. His example challenges us to be guardians of memories, wisdom, and the values we'll pass to younger generations.